Hello, everybody. Thank you for your participation in a Critical Issues Forum online teachers workshop. Today, I would like to introduce this year's students' research project and assignment, including a 1-minute project and a final presentation. And I will try to explain as specifically as possible. And I know, but there will be some questions, especially from new teachers. So please do not hesitate to ask me any questions. And after this workshop, of course, I will do a lot of follow-up. So if you have any questions and if you don't understand what I'm trying to say here, please don't worry. But again, I will do my best to be very specific and very clear. So this year's topic is Toward War-Free of Nuclear Weapons, the role of youth as change agents. So this is a very timely and very inspiring topic. In May 2018, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres launched an ambitious disarmament agenda, Securing Our Common Future, an agenda for disarmament, with an aim to reinvigorate the disarmament process. He emphasized the importance of education. He said, more education and training opportunities should be established in order to empower young people to be a force for change and disarmament. In fact, his statement really inspired me to decide this year's topic. Moreover, at the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly this year, for the first time, the resolution titled Youth Disarmament and Non-Proliferation was adopted. This was adopted without vote. It highlighted the importance of promoting the meaningful and inclusive participation of young people in discussions in the field of disarmament and non-proliferation. Youth has become a keyword across many fields at the United Nations, especially in the field of disarmament and non-proliferation, mainstreaming youth participation in these fields. And I also wanted to let you know that I included both documents in the useful resources, which I am going to introduce later in a different session. In recent years, the international and regional security environment surrounding nuclear weapons has encountered many challenges and crises. Also, division between nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states has become more and more serious. It seems to be very difficult to find a common ground in terms of approaches to a world free of nuclear weapons. Under such a situation, it is difficult to find a short-term solution. Therefore, it is very important to promote disarmament and non-proliferation education, especially for younger generations. That is why we believe it is important for us to provide the opportunity for next generation leaders to study this important issue, nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. One of the most notable setbacks in nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament is, as many of CNS experts mentioned in their lectures for this year's CIF workshop, the setback in nuclear arms control between the United States and Russia. The United States and Russia possess more than 90% of the world nuclear weapons. Over 25 years after the end of the Cold War, there are still almost 14,000 nuclear weapons existing in this world. This fact itself indicates that humanity still lives with nuclear threats. In addition, North Korea's nuclear and missile programs still exist despite some diplomatic breakthrough between North Korea and the United States. There is no real denuclearization talk yet. And recently, the tension between North Korea and the United States again is increasing. Furthermore, the U.S. unilateral withdrawal from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, so-called Iran nuclear deal. Again, open the door for Iran to quickly expand its nuclear development capability. I hope young generations, especially CIF participating high school students, will be a solution to make progress toward a world free of nuclear weapons. As high school students, the first thing you can do is to study nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. This year, you will tackle the multitude of challenges in the field of nuclear weapons and how to move forward toward peace and security of a world free of nuclear weapons. So today, I'm going to describe this year's project goals, objectives, and students' assignments. I also want to emphasize that it is the teachers who will directly work with the students and guide them throughout the project duration. While CNS is providing instructions and study materials, each school has different situation. Therefore, I hope each school conducts the CIF project in a way that works best for your school. If you have any questions or concerns while you are working with the students, please do not hesitate to contact me anytime. And CIF staff members are here to help each school, especially teachers. And I would like to make sure that each school is going to have a really precious and valuable experience through this CIF project. Now, let me talk about the CIF project goals. First, I will start with these overarching project goals. These goals remain the same every year, regardless of topics. The first goal is to develop critical thinking skills through project activities. We want students to think critically and to develop analytical skills while learning this year's subject matters. We want students to find their own solutions based on their research. Second, we want students to enhance cross-cultural understanding. There are participants from 3 different countries: the United States, Japan, and Russia. Obviously, each country has a very unique background and a very interesting connection with nuclear weapons. And even in the same country, there are so many different opinions regarding nuclear weapons, the nuclear disarmament policy. So we hope students will learn from each other while respecting different opinions and different cultures. The third overarching goal is to raise awareness of nuclear weapons related challenges among the participants. Nuclear weapons related issues are challenging and complicated, and sometimes many people think such issues are too difficult for high school students to address, but they are wrong. I truly believe that high school students are fully capable to tackle these problems. With guidance from teachers, students can come up with very unique and creative solutions. And most importantly, I really want students to increase their interest in nuclear disarmament issues. Nuclear weapons and climate changes are both existential threats to humanity. But as you see, only climate change, especially recently, is getting more and more attention it deserves. And mainly thanks to the high school student, Greta Thunberg. Both are important, but unfortunately, nuclear weapons threats are not getting enough attention, especially among young generations. So more widely, in addition to the CIF students, I hope more high school students can pay attention to this, one of the most pressing global challenges, and start thinking to solve the problems. And you, CIF students, can certainly contribute to that goal. I do not think all of the CIF students will become nuclear experts, but it is important for more and more young generations to become interested in this important issue. This will have a big impact. The fourth goal is to deepen students' knowledge associated with the nuclear weapons issues, international peace and security throughout the project. The fifth goal is content mastery. Students are going to study challenging issues related to nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament, particularly this year's topic, toward a world free of nuclear weapons, the role of youth as change agent. There are so many things to study in this area. It is natural if you do not understand all of the issues during this short period of time, and it's okay. But I believe that this is a great opportunity for high school students to study this important issue. And I really hope that all of you enjoy the project. The sixth goal is we want students to come up with action plans to make progress toward a world free of nuclear weapons. Since this year's topic also highlights the importance of the role of youth as change agents, I hope each high school comes up with some action plans for a world free of nuclear weapons. The last goal is somewhat a long-term goal. The project aims to help enhance students' future career prospects in globalized world so that they can have a positive impact on their society and international peace and security. So I do hope that each of the students who participate in the CIF becomes an awakened citizen to make progress toward the peace and security of a world free of nuclear weapons and to become a citizen to have a positive impact on their society and the international peace and security. Now, I would like to talk about the project goals and outcomes specifically related to this year's topic, toward a world free of nuclear weapons, the role of youth as change agents. These are our expectations, and we hope that students can achieve these goals through the project. I want students to make efforts to understand these issues through the project activities, and research. At the same time, I do not want you to feel overwhelmed. Nuclear disarmament is a quite heavy topic, but I want you to enjoy the project, and making efforts itself is important. So now let me go through goals related to this year's topic. The students will aim to understand the current global nuclear weapons situation. The first lecture by Mr. Jean Dupree and Sarah Bidger's lecture on the world nuclear weapons status are good resources for this purpose. Students will aim to understand the basic science of nuclear weapons. The lecture given by Dr. Ferenc Dernek-Veres can help you to understand this, the scientific background of nuclear weapons. Students will aim to understand the difference between arms control, non-proliferation, disarmament, and abolition. Some people often use these terms interchangeably, but sometimes you have to be very specific. So I would like to encourage you to look at the glossary that I included in the useful resources, which I also introduce in my next talk. Students will aim to understand international efforts to prevent nuclear proliferation, reduce the number of nuclear weapons, and achieve total elimination of nuclear weapons. In addition to treaties, international treaties, it is important to understand the key actors in the international arena in disarmament field. The United Nations has an important role for disarmament and non-proliferation. Also, civil society movements for nuclear disarmament played an important role, especially in the adoption of the Nuclear Weapons Ban Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And Mr. Dupree's lecture on the United Nations disarmament machinery explained each organization's role in the field of disarmament and non-proliferation. Students will aim to understand an overview of the US, Soviet, Russia bilateral arms control treaties. The United States and Russia, formerly Soviet Union, are the two world's largest nuclear weapons possessing countries. And only these two countries have bilateral arms control treaties. So these two countries' nuclear weapons related issues are very important part of the disarmament education. And Ms. Sarah Bidgood's lecture is helpful to understand the US-Soviet, US-Russia cooperation in the field of nuclear arms control, non-proliferation, and disarmament. Students will aim to recognize disarmament progress or lack thereof. People have different opinions about the progress of nuclear disarmament. Some people say the rate is too slow and argue that the countries with nuclear weapons are not fulfilling their promise under Article 6 of the NPT. Article 6 contains disarmament obligation. However, the United States and Russia have decreased their weapons from 70,000 during the Cold War to about current 14,000. Nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states have very different perspectives toward the rate of disarmament progress and approaches to a world free of nuclear weapons. So we need to study these different perspectives. Students will aim to understand the overview of the current nuclear weapons related risks and challenges. There are many challenges in nuclear weapons related field, and I will provide some suggested topics later in this same talk. But for example, these challenges include possible new arms race between the United States and Russia, nuclear weapons modernizations, US nuclear weapons policy, Iran's nuclear program, North Korea's nuclear weapons program, and potential use of nuclear weapons, just to name a few. These topics are covered in the online lectures we provided. Students will aim to understand the current divided opinions toward nuclear disarmament in multilateral nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament efforts. When we study the different opinions toward the Nuclear Weapons Ban Treaty, you will understand that division is very deep. Students will examine how the global community can solve the current nuclear challenges and crises. As your research progresses, you understand that solving problems related to nuclear disarmament is not easy at all. And you will see there are many different opposing views and opinions. So I would like you to challenge to come up with your own solutions based on your studies. Students will develop your vision for pathway to or solution for solving current nuclear crisis and challenges to achieve the peace and security of a world without nuclear weapons. And finally, students will come up with your plan of action to make progress toward a world free of nuclear weapons based on your comprehensive research. In order to realize these goals I just stated, students are going to complete 2 assignments, 1 mini project and 1 final project. The purpose of the completion of the mini project is for students to demonstrate that they have studied and they have understood the basic of nuclear issues. The mini project deadline is going to be in late February, and I will talk about deadlines and important dates related to this year's CIF project at the end of the workshop during the wrap-up session. The mini project will be posted on the CIF website. They will also be reviewed by CNS experts, and each school will receive feedback for further improvement. So students have a chance to revise the project for a better final project outcome. The final project is going to be presented at the spring conference, and the students will be required to submit drafts of the final project before the spring conference. Final projects will also be posted on the CIF website. Most likely, student presentations at the conference will be videotaped. So students' project will be posted along with the video recordings. So to reiterate, students will have 2 deliverables to complete, 1 mini project and 1 final project. To help produce these 2 deliverables, students will go through suggested research phases. I am going to talk more about the research phases in a minute. We have designed the project this way so that all of the students' research activities will lead to the final project. This chart is a summary of what I just said. And hopefully this can give you a clearer idea regarding our expectations on what your students are supposed to submit. There are 3 research phases and 2 deliverables. Again, the 2 deliverables are the mini project and the final project. And the final project is a final presentation at the student conference. So roughly speaking, in research phase 1, you will work on fact-finding on the topic. In research phase 2, you will identify 1 or 2 problems related to nuclear weapons in the context of this year's topic. And in research phase 3, you will analyze your selected problems and find your own solutions based on your studies. I will explain objectives and suggested topics of each phase in more details in a minute. But before I go into the details of the project and each phase, I want to remind you of the 4 content domains of the CIF project. All the participants will examine this year's topic in CIF's 4 content domains. These are scientific, environmental, social, cultural, economic, and political, geopolitical aspects. CIF is an interdisciplinary project. Since non-proliferation and disarmament nuclear weapons are complicated and challenging topics for everybody, students need to tackle these problems from various perspectives and disciplines. For example, if you understand the scientific aspects of nuclear weapons alone, but do not have enough knowledge about policy aspects of nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation, you cannot make any persuasive argument on nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. The same thing can be said for the opposite. Therefore, we encourage teachers and students to conduct research and gather information and data from the 4 content domains the CIF project is using when it is possible to do so. Also, I would like to briefly talk about citations for student deliverables. These requirements related to citation are important reminders for all of us who conduct any academic research. We also included training videos on these requirements, how to cite sources correctly, by an English language professor. These training videos are also posted on the CIF Teachers Workshop website, so please make sure to watch them. Project deliverables must be students' original work. We do not want to see students citing and pasting, students cutting and pasting from websites such as Wikipedia. No copy and paste. When students are going to use materials borrowed from other sources for the project, these materials must be properly and fully cited based on accepted academic practices. Those materials must be quoted and cited or paraphrased and cited. Also, if students are going to use photos, graphics, or multimedia, including video clips, charts, and other visual materials borrowed from other places, please make sure that those materials must be available for educational purposes. It is always better to use public domains. I want to recommend using public sites, including governments and international organizations' websites. The best websites to go include the United Nations, International Atomic Energy Agency, and Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization's photo libraries. And if you want to use photos from news media, such as TV or newspapers, you may need to get the owner's permission. So please be careful. And I will give you one session to introduce useful resources, including international organizations and research institutes, later in the workshop. Now, I would like to talk about Research Phase 1. Research Phase 1's objectives are fact-finding on the status of the world nuclear weapons and basic nuclear science. In Research Phase 1, students are going to build a basic foundation. In Research Phase 1, students will complete one mini-project. In order to understand the status of nuclear weapons in the world today and the basic nuclear science, students will do the following research activities. Students will study the basic components and the physical impact of nuclear weapons. You do not need to go into too much details, but it is important to understand the basics function of nuclear weapons. Students will also need to study how nuclear weapons work from scientific perspectives. Dr. Ferenc Dernek-Veres's lecture describes these elements. Please also use the useful resources I am going to present. Students will identify which nations have nuclear weapons, how many nuclear weapons exist, and where they are located. You also need to identify nuclear weapon states, including countries who are not members of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Ms. Sarah Bidger's first lecture on the World Nuclear Weapons Overview covers these items. Students will identify existing nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament treaties, such as Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, or CTBT, Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or TPNW. Mr. Jean Dupree's lecture on international non-proliferation and disarmament regime is very helpful for this task. Then students will identify several nuclear weapons-related crises and challenges in recent years. At this stage, you do not need to conduct in-depth research of each issue, each of nuclear challenges and crises. You will have opportunities to select your topic. You won't conduct research in the research phase too. When students submit their mini-project, please note the following issues. Mini-project will be posted on the CIF website. Therefore, the project needs to be visually presentable. Students are encouraged to use some technological tools to enhance their presentations. Having said that, content of the presentation is more important than tools. So if you create visually fancy presentation, but there are lots of errors and misunderstandings, you may need to redo your project to correct the erroneous information. If your school decides to write an essay, that is also fine. However, please include some visual aids for your presentations to be posted on the project website. Please include appropriate photos, graphics, and charts that enhance your essay. And please remember to cite sources appropriately. And this applies to all the mini projects, all the different formats. I included some examples from previous years. So I encourage you to take a look at those for your reference. So please visit these websites from these links. These are some example forms for the mini project. Nowadays, students know more presentations tools than I know. So these may be already outdated. Some schools used interactive maps to present the world nuclear status, and the PowerPoint presentations are still major forms of a presentation of the mini project. Some schools are now using Prezi, a little bit fancier than PowerPoint. Again, if you want to write an essay using a Word document, that is also fine, but please include some visual aids. Some schools have created websites and blogs to post students' work. That is also a very creative way to conduct your project. Some schools created a short film to demonstrate students' understanding of the content of nuclear issues. And that is also great. So if you are planning to create some audio-visual materials, like video clips or some podcast, that is also fine, and that's wonderful. But please include your transcripts in that case. You can propose other formats, but please check with me beforehand. And in order to see previous year's students' work, please visit our project website. You can find previous year's student mini project here in these links. Now, I will talk about research phase 2. Research phase 2 is part of the final project. At this phase, students will select 1 or 2 nuclear weapons-related crises and challenges and conduct in-depth research and identify how those challenges affect the current international, regional nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament regimes. As I mentioned in the research phase 1, it is important for students to understand the overview of the world nuclear status, basic nuclear science, and an overview of world nuclear challenges and crises. By the end of the research phase 1, students will have learned an overview of several major nuclear crises and challenges. However, each challenge is very complicated, so we do not expect that the students conduct in-depth research of each of those major challenges. That's too much work. Rather, we would like to ask students to select 1 or 2 major nuclear challenges for further investigation. Again, please remember this phase 2 will be part of the student's final project. So this is not a separate deliverable to be submitted. In this research phase, there are several objectives. These are objectives of research phase 2. So I would like to go through these objectives. Students will identify the current nuclear crisis and challenges to international peace and security. Students will understand how such challenges and crises affect global nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament regimes. Students will deepen their knowledge of some of nuclear crises and challenges they have chosen to further investigate. Students will understand the challenges to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT, and the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or TPNW, and what the differences are between the two treaties. Students will understand humanitarian impacts of the use of nuclear weapons. Students will understand international efforts to abolish nuclear weapons. Students will understand why there are different perspectives in nuclear disarmament. By the time students will start working on research phase 2, students will have acquired basic knowledge of the world nuclear weapons status and the basics of nuclear weapons science. Students will build their work for the research phase 2 on their studies they have conducted in the research phase 1. The following points are some suggested tasks for research phase 2, and these are part of a student's final project. Also, these are suggested tasks, so you do not need to conduct all of these tasks. Students can choose some of the following tasks. Students do not need to, nor should they, include all of these in their final project. We do, however, encourage students and teachers to have some time to discuss all of these items somehow. I hope you can find time to do so. Each topic is related to and interconnected with the other topics. So you can also choose to combine some of these tasks here. Suggested tasks for research in this phase 2 include: students will determine the most eminent nuclear threats posing to international peace and security, and explain why. How should these pressing threats be addressed? Students will select one or two specific issues, conduct research on those topics, including background information, current status, why they are serious threats both regionally and globally. Students will investigate US-Russia relations, arms control treaties from historical perspectives, and current crisis, possible new arms races, and potential use of nuclear weapons. Students will investigate Iran's nuclear program, especially after the US withdrawal from the JCPOA, so-called Iran nuclear deal. How will this impact the Middle East and other global nuclear issues? You can find information about this task in the lecture given by Dr. Hyun Kane. Continuing from the previous slide, students will investigate North Korea's nuclear weapons and missile program and current situation and future prospects. You can find information about North Korea in the lecture given by Mr. Hyuk Kim, and Mr. Jean Dupree also mentioned North Korea in his overview lecture, and Ms. Anna Peregrino, the lecture, also talked about North Korea's missile and nuclear issues. Students will investigate nuclear weapons issues in South Asia, India, Pakistan, and the possibility of the use of nuclear weapons in the region. You can find the information about South Asia in the lecture given by Dr. Sharad Joshi. Students will investigate how other NPT nuclear weapon states, especially China, will be part of the arms race, and what role China can play in global nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. Students will investigate the major obstacles at the 2020 NPT Review Conference. Students will investigate different policies and perspectives toward TPNW and TPNW, Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. There are mainly three different groups when you talk about the different approaches toward the world free of nuclear weapons. The first one is nuclear weapon states. The second one is non-nuclear weapon states under the nuclear umbrella. And the third group is non-nuclear weapon states, not relying on the nuclear umbrella. And they have different policies toward this treaty, the TPNW. Although first and second groups have a similar policy toward the TPNW. You can find information related to this topic in my lecture on Nuclear Disarmament Initiative and Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or TPNW. Students will investigate how and if the TPNW and other existing nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament treaties, NPT and CTBT, can complement each other. I think some topics I listed above are similar to the others. So again, you can certainly combine some of these topics. Also, if you come up with any different research topics in this phase 2, please feel free to pursue the different topics. And if you have any questions about these topics, please feel free to contact me. And again, the research phase 2 is part of the student's final project to be presented at the conference. So you do not need to submit a separate paper or presentation for research phase 2. Research phase 2 is going to be part of final project. Just want to reiterate this point. This phase is the first half of the final project, which is the final presentation at the conference, and provides the background for research phase 3. After selecting one or two topics for phase 2, you will select the relevant research tasks we have suggested to help structure your research project. Your research outcomes at the research phase 2 will be presented as part of the final presentation at the students' conference. Research phase 2 will be the foundation of research phase 3. At this stage, I would also like to know your plan for the final presentation. So when you start research phase 2 and select specific topics, you should also start outlining your final presentation in research phase 3. Since research phase 2 will be part of your final presentation, it is important to start planning your final presentation concurrently when you start your research phase 2. So basically, research phase 2 and research phase 3 are inseparable for most of the case. These are some suggested topics in the research phase 2. Since these are suggested topics, you can choose some of the topics from this list of suggestions, or you can decide your own topics. But in the process of deciding your final presentation topic, you will need to let me know your plan. So these are suggested topics. Case studies on US-Russia Soviet arms control negotiations, treaties from historical perspectives, and current development. Case studies of US and Russian nuclear weapons policy, each or both. Case studies on US-Russian policy toward New START extension or termination. Case studies of Iranian nuclear program and the current status of JCPOA, Iran nuclear deal after the US withdrawal from JCPOA. Case studies of North Korea's nuclear weapons and missile program and recent development. Case studies of the humanitarian impact of the use of nuclear weapons. Case studies of the overview of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the current status, including signatures and ratification, and what the biggest challenges in the TPNW. Case studies of a possibility of TPNW opponents and proponents can find some common ground and collaboratively work for nuclear disarmament. Again, these are suggested topics, not required topics, so you do not need to conduct research on all of these. So now I'm going to move into the research phase 3. Research phase 3, which is the final stage of a research objective is nuclear. So these the objectives include looking ahead to the future, your vision, your solutions to accomplish a world free of nuclear weapons. In the research phase 3, students will present their own vision, their solution to make progress toward a world free of nuclear weapons. And these solutions and visions need to be supported by their research they have conducted in phase 1 and phase 2. Students should apply the knowledge they have acquired in research phase 1 and 2 to the research phase 3. In research phase 1, students have learned basic facts about the world nuclear weapon status, the basic science of nuclear weapons, existing nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament treaties, and an overview of the current nuclear crisis and challenges. In research phase 2, students have selected 1 or 2 nuclear weapons-related crises and conduct in-depth research, and identified how those challenges affect the current international and regional nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament regimes. And finally, in this phase 3, students will come up with their own solutions and conclusion based on these studies in phase 1 and phase 2. In this phase, based on your studies you have conducted in phase 1 and phase 2, you will synthesize, evaluate, and analyze the information and knowledge you have acquired. Then, you will select 1 or 2 topics related to your research you have chosen in phase 2 to come up with your vision, your solutions to reduce nuclear risk and eventual nuclear-free world. Again, these are suggested topics, so you do not need to conduct in-depth research on all of these topics. Like the research phase 2, some topics I listed below are similar to the others. So again, you can certainly combine some topics. Also, if you come up with any different research topics in this phase 3, please feel free to pursue those topics. But please remember that both research phase 2 and 3 are part of the final presentation. So topic you have selected in research phase 2 needs to be relevant to research phase 3. So these are some suggested topics. Students will investigate whether international community can collaborate to reduce the current imminent nuclear risks both globally and regionally. Students will investigate how the United States and Russia, the world's largest nuclear weapon states, can work together to reduce nuclear weapons and eventually disarmament while extending the New START treaty. Students will analyze how to make progress toward the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula that may lead to regional peace and security. Students will investigate how to mitigate tensions over Iran's nuclear program and how to bring any positive development to the Middle East, including the creation of a weapons of mass destruction-free zone in the Middle East. Students will investigate how to mitigate tensions between India and Pakistan and any possibility of these two South Asia rivals agree to disarm their nuclear weapons. Students will analyze how humanitarian approach and the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or TPNW, can contribute to make progress toward a world free of nuclear weapons. Students will analyze in this divided world in terms of the approaches to nuclear disarmament, how TPNW proponents and opponents can find common ground or build bridges to reduce nuclear risk and work together for nuclear disarmament. Students will determine concrete action plans to make actual progress toward a world free of nuclear weapons. Students will examine the role of civil society international organizations, educational institutions to reduce nuclear risks and make progress toward a world free of nuclear weapons. With these research topics, students can present their own ideas on vision and pathways for a world free of nuclear weapons. At the student conference to be held in March in Montreal, each school will make about a 15 to 20 minutes presentation, followed by about a 10-minute question and answer session. These are some example forms of final presentations. Students are encouraged to use multimedia technology tools. However, again, remember that the content is more important than technology. Also, presenting a video is great, especially if you interviewed your local experts and fellow students, your classmates, who cannot come to the spring conference in Montreal. However, please note that your presentation must be a combination of live presentation and video. Just showing a 20-minute video is not a good idea. Most schools used PowerPoint or Prezi in the past, and some short video clips were included there. Some schools have also done a role play or skits, which was also nice. Again, any new idea is welcome, but please check with me for pre-approval. For previous year's student presentations, please visit previous year's spring conference web pages in these links. Students also need to submit an outline of the presentation before the conference. In addition, students also need to submit 1 or 2 paragraph summary of their final presentation to be posted on the spring conference booklet. And your presentation outline needs to be approved by me. Please see the previous year's presentation in these links. So between now and the spring conference, I will communicate with each school frequently to make sure that each school has a good understanding on final presentation and a mini project. And again, if you have a question, please don't hesitate to ask me any question at any time. And I would also like to utilize the CIF project website to conduct some group discussion. There is a blog section under the CIF website. So I always try to do that, but I have not been so successful. But I will try anyway. And we often use our Facebook group, and we continue to do so. But there are some people who are not on Facebook or any social media, which is totally fine. I will never ask students or teachers to join the Facebook group or Twitter if they do not want to. But still, I created CIF Facebook page, so I would like to encourage you to visit. Also, if necessary, I would like to have some follow-up sessions using whatever appropriate online tool with some schools individually, especially like a kind of new schools or first year schools. You may have more questions than the veteran schools. But all of the essential communications will be done via email. So again, please feel free to ask any question. And I look forward to working with all of you. I also wanted to, I posted some CIF Facebook, some CIF social media tools. So we are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So if you are on social media, please follow both CIF and our center, CNS. And I want to use these social media platforms wisely and effectively to promote the CIF project widely. But most importantly, I want to make sure that each school and all the participating students and teachers can really enjoy the CIF project. Although the topics are very heavy and we are studying very serious issues, but it is so encouraging that high school students are studying this important issue. And there are very dedicated teachers. So again, I would like to thank you so much for all of your dedication. As I emphasized many times, the role of teachers is very important for this project, and I really appreciate all of your support and cooperation for the CIF project. So please contact me if you have any question. So thank you so much. I'm going to conclude this session. Thank you so much.